It's now 100 days since Hamas terrorists invaded Israel, raping, killing and kidnapping civilians in a barbaric medieval rampage. To those now ferociously criticising the escalation in the region, remember who escalated this in the first place. Hamas shattered peace in the Middle East, and they knew exactly what the response would be. Well, yesterday they reminded the world exactly what they are, releasing a sick video of 3 of the 136 hostages still trapped in Gaza, including Noah Agarmani, a student kidnapped from a rave on the back of a motorbike, while her mother now battles terminal cancer at home. Well, tonight Hamas released another video, this time just of Noah, and this time she was taped saying that the 2 men who appeared alongside her yesterday are now dead. Make no mistake, the vile people who took these innocent people as hostages are responsible for the catalyst of horrors we're now witnessing. There's no moral defence for Hamas. But many of the pro-Palestine protesters who took to the streets again this weekend in New York, Washington, D.C. and London do have a point. The civilian death toll in Gaza is testing the upper limits of proportionality. More people are dying every day than in any other conflict in modern history. Israel's no plan for life beyond the war except occupation or anarchy. And the nightmare scenario of a conflict engulfing the region is edging closer to grim reality, with US-led strikes on Yemen and fears of war in Lebanon. Prime Minister Netanyahu, pandering to extremists who prop up his government, says nothing, not even the International Court of Justice, will stop him.
100 days to the atrocious day where our citizens were butchered and abducted. We continue with the war to the end, to the full victory, until we achieve all the objectives. Liquidating the Hamas, bringing back their hostages, and the promise that Gaza will never become yet again a threat to Israel. We're going to bring back safety to the south and to the north. No one is going to stop us. Neither The Hague, not the axis of evil, and nobody else.
Well, reports here in the US say that President Biden hasn't even spoken to Netanyahu for more than 3 weeks, simply because he won't listen to his calls for caution. Well, he should, and soon. Israel is vital to the West. It's the only democracy in the Middle East. It's a bulwark against Iran and its proxies. It's supposed to be a safe haven for the Jewish people after centuries of persecution. So yes, America is right to defend Israel, just as Israel has a right to defend itself. But it can't be handed a blank cheque signed in Palestinian blood. Israel has dropped almost 30,000 bombs and shells on Gaza in 100 days, 8 times more than the US aimed at Iraq in 6 years of war. It's true that every war in human history has taken many lives, including many innocent civilian lives. But 24,000 people in 3 months, with God knows how many more beneath the rubble, is that still a proportionate response? Every day of this war, I've asked that question of many guests. From afar, it's looking increasingly like the answer is becoming no. It's true that the Allied forces killed masses of innocent people in Dresden, in Hiroshima, and beyond to defeat the Nazis in World War II. But that was 79 years ago. We created systems of international law to make sure the atrocities on both sides would never be repeated. It's true that this was Israel's 9/11, and there was no public appetite for restraint back then. But that yearning for justice took US into 2 disastrous and deadly wars. Shouldn't Israel learn from those mistakes? And it's true that Hamas is an oppressive, misogynistic terror group which hides in tunnels and uses its people as human shields. But 85% of the entire population has now been displaced. 70% of Gaza's homes and half of its buildings are damaged or destroyed. Only 8 of its 36 hospitals are running. 2/3 of schools and 100 mosques have been damaged by Israel's bombardment. Is destruction on this scale really what it takes to eradicate Hamas? And if the answer is yes, well, why are they still in charge? When will Israel provide some evidence that it has a plan for life after this war, for the Gazans and for Israel, and that that plan is remotely workable? There are major unanswered questions about this war, with major consequences for the world. But the most visceral consequences of the last 100 days have fallen most heavily on the shoulders of the people behind the numbers on both sides. People like Thomas Hand, whose daughter Emily turned 9 during 50 days in Hamas captivity as a hostage. Thomas Hand's emotional interviews brought home the reality of this war for those of us who can only imagine the pain, including most movingly when he wrongly assumed that she was dead.
They just said, "We found Emily. she's dead. And I went, yes! That was the best possibly that I was hoping for. She was either dead or in Gaza. And if you know anything about what they do to people in Gaza, that is worse than death. So death was a blessing, an absolute blessing.
Well, thankfully, it turned out that the real blessing was that Emily wasn't dead. She wasn't actually mistreated in the way that Thomas feared most at the hands of Hamas, and eventually she was returned to him. And people like Thomas Hand are what this war should never lose sight of. We should never forget that there are still 136 hostages being held in captivity. It's also why Israel must be better than the evil it's trying to overcome. Well, I spoke to Thomas Hand and his daughter Emily shortly before we came on air today. Well, I'm delighted to say I'm joined now by Thomas Hand and by his daughter Emily. So, Thomas, it's fantastic to see you both. It's great to see you because I guess because I'm a father, I have a 12-year-old girl myself. I'm Irish. And so your story, of so many stories in this awful war, resonated with me very personally. And I can't tell you how thrilled I was when you were reunited with Emily. And let me start just by asking you about that moment for you. What was it like for you to finally, after everything you'd been through, thinking she was dead, then hearing she might be alive, then hearing she was being released, the moment that we all watched on video when she ran towards you, what were you thinking?
It was unbelievable. It was a miracle. When we were waiting, they were supposed to have released her much earlier than that during the day, according to our agreements. But we waited a long time. And during that time, of course, I'm thinking something's gone wrong, something's going to go wrong, either on the Hamas side or on our own government side, the Israeli government side. You know, you just, until I saw the color of her eyes, I couldn't hope. I had to keep my feelings and emotions down.
I can see her sitting there. She doesn't speak much English. You brought her up speaking Hebrew. But she wanted to sit in on this interview with you, which I guess may be an indication just generally of not wanting to leave your side very much. How has she been doing, Emily, since she got back?
To be very honest, she's doing incredibly well. Kids are just amazingly resilient. Her speech is almost back at full volume. She's eating like a horse. She sleeps well. Not too many nightmares. Not too many nightmares. The occasional one, but sometimes I just watch her in the night, and when I see her crunching up her face, I wake her up, break the nightmare.
And how are you doing, Thomas? Because you've been through so much in the last 100 days. Your peaceful life was suddenly just thrown to pieces in so many ways, and I'll come to some of the other ways that people may not even realize. But how are you doing?
I'm actually doing very well. I actually wasn't in a great position before this all started, mentally, depression. But because of it all, it's made me stronger. If you can get through this, I can get through anything. All the interviews, all the television interviews, the newspaper interviews, you're reliving not just that day. My day started the evening before. So I'm living from the 6th, the evening of the 6th, to whenever the interview took place. Like, I'm maybe going to have to relive it again for you from the 6th till this date. And so I was at one point talking 12 hours a day, every day of the week. And that's basically what you do in therapy. It was free psychotherapy. So I'm much stronger.
On October the 7th, we know now that Emily, of course, was having a sleepover with her friend Hilla. And her mother was to play a very important role with what then happened with Emily. And we'll come to that. But what was your first inkling that something very bad was going down?
Okay, right. Yeah, it was instinct. It was there was no way to work out something like that was happening. It was a feeling of dread. Something not right on that day. Since we pulled out of Gaza in 2005, we've been peppered, hammered with Qassam rockets from Gaza all the time. And we're used to that. We just get the siren. It's Savor Adom. It comes over the whole intercom connections. Even on your phone, Savor Adom. Savor Adom means red colour. So wherever you are, you look for the nearest bomb shelter and get there pretty swiftly. We have, in Kibbutz Be'eri, we have 11 seconds, which isn't a long time, but you don't panic. And at first you panicked, you ran like the clappers, but as the years go by, you just drop everything in a second. There's no panic, you just swiftly get there. 11 seconds is quite a long time.
The full horror of what is actually unfurling took quite a while to be understood by people, the kind of medieval barbarism that was going on. But what was the moment, Thomas, for you that you realised that Emily was gone?
Not for a few days later. I'm sorry, but my time scale is completely gone. These last 3 months seem like a year already, so I have no time reference anymore. But within a week, I was informed that she'd been found dead in the kibbutz.